Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Art with Nathan. Today we're going to be looking at cross-hatching. Now, if you've been following our last few episodes, you would have been drawing lots of lines, lots of shapes. We've looked at shading, and now we're going to look at cross-hatching. Now, cross-hatching is a little bit different from shading something gradually. Cross-hatching is using lines, so it's an abstract way of communicating tone and value. And it's a really great way to draw something quickly and express objects and shapes in a very efficient, virtuoso way. And I would encourage you to adopt cross-hatching into your drawing because it really translates well into painting. So when you start painting, it's a good technique to have this strokey way of putting on color, putting on tone. And if you're sketching, there isn't a faster way other than cross-hatching. So it is really complex, but the more you practice it, the more intuitive it becomes, the more easier it becomes. So basically, so I'm talking about cross-hatching. The first thing we learn is hatching. So let's say you have a plane that you want to give some tone. Okay, let's give it two planes right here. So we're going to just use hatching at first to give these two planes just two various tones. Now, if you remember, with our previous lesson, we had tones from 1 to 9, where 1 was the absolute whitest and 9 was the darkest. We're going to just give these two different tones. So hatching basically is just parallel lines. So let's start with 45 angle degree lines. And you'll see they're quite uniform. Okay. So immediately visually, if you look at these two different planes, they communicate two different things. This plane, it has some tone. There is some disturbance in the purity of the plane. So immediately our brains think this one is darker than this one. And if you bring the lines closer together, trying really hard to keep the lines nice and parallel and neat. Again, practice your lines. Keep them confident. Keep the movement well. Okay. So if you have a look, all I've done are parallel lines. And in this square, I have done them closer together. And you can immediately see that there's a difference in tone. There's a gradient. And if I continue in this way, draw another square here with lines closer together, let's actually do that below. We can start to see how this creates the illusion of light and darkness. I'm going to draw this quite quickly so you can see. This is quite a big scale that I'm drawing with. You'll be drawing on a piece of paper. You'll find it'll be much, much easier. Let's draw a few lines over here. Okay. So this is a good way to practice, is in these squares. Now, for those of you who are still starting out, when you draw your square and you're struggling to get that 45 angle degree line, it's not quite getting where you want it, I would suggest starting off corner to corner and building it from that line, because it's already 45 degrees. If you're left-handed, obviously it's going to be that way. So one of the cool things about hatch lines is if you look at artists' drawings, you can tell if they're left-handed or right-handed. And whether you want to communicate that or not is totally up to you, but I quite like that. Okay, so there we see a definite increase in tone amongst these three squares. And this isn't the only way in which we can hatch. There are other ways to communicate tone with hatching. It gets a bit more complex moving forward. So I'm just going to use this square over here to show you. All right? So we've got a new square. And let's say within this square, I want to communicate more than just a single gradient of tone, a single plane. So what I'm going to do is let's use horizontal lines this time around. We're trying to keep them as even as possible. Okay. So let's say I want the gradient to be heavier on this side than that side. How would I achieve that? Only using hatching marks. So one way is to weight the lines. So I'm going back and I'm redrawing the lines a bit heavier on the one side. So I'm just strengthening each line. So there we can see, so it's this one over here. Within this plane, there is a gradient going from dark on this side to light on that side. And it's just by strengthening the lines on the one side. I'm going to do another square. There's another way that you can do this. So let's say you're drawing with a pencil or you're drawing with a fountain pen. Now a fountain pen has a chisel head. So the tip of the fountain pen will look like that. So you can get a thick line drawing that way, or if you turned it to the side where it looks like that, you get a thin line. Okay, so with this whiteboard marker, it's got a bullet head shape, so I can manipulate the thickness of the line from thick to thin. Can you see that? From thick to thin. So I'm going to try to recreate this effect just using the angle of my implement. So thick to thin, thick to thin. So this can work with a pencil as well. Now, so immediately we automatically associate pencil with shading, where you gradually work the tone in a way where you can't see any of the lines. Now pencils are really fine for that, but they also work very well as, especially a sharp pencil, as tools. I forgot to move my mark on that one, as tools for cross-hatching. So I carry a pencil with me wherever I go, and then I naturally just draw using cross-hatching. Another thing, using the side of the pencil while you're shading, it keeps the pencil sharp. Okay. So there we have, again, very similar to this square, using a thicker line to a thinner line. And sometimes a thicker line can be achieved just by pressing a bit harder to pressing soft. Okay, so not only is the change of angle, but also the change of pressure. You're putting more emphasis into the darker areas, and you're getting lighter. So a big thing about drawing is developing the dexterity in your hands, the sensitivity of mark from light to dark. And that's one of the biggest obstacles many art students have to overcome, in my experience, is just learning this very subtle hand-eye coordination of pressing lightly and pressing hard when it comes to it. And that just comes with practice and just being very sensitive to the mark and being aware that your drawings are made up of a series of marks. Okay, so this has all got to do with hatching lines that are parallel to each other, quite uniform. So there's another way to express tone just using parallel hatch lines. I'm going to do it in this square over here. Let's draw another square. Okay. So hatch lines do not have to be all parallel. Like if that's the way you want to draw, and you've decided that this is where you want your drawing to work, that's absolutely fine. But another way to express tones is how close and how far the lines are from one another. So again, in this square, I don't want a uniform tone. I want to create something like I did in these two squares. I want a gradient from the one side to the other side. So let's say I want it dark on this side, and as it progresses through the square, from here to here, I want it to get lighter. Now, how do I achieve that? Without using this technique, Easy. Combination of these two, yeah. Where it is darker, the lines are going to be closer together. And as I get further away from the darker area, my lines get further apart. So this is hatching frequency. So the frequency of the hatch marks change. As we get closer to where there's less light, the hatch lines become closer together. As you get further away, as you get closer to the light, the hatch lines become further away. So you can combine this technique with these two. Let me show you. So you can really see, once you start combining techniques, it can get quite complex. I would suggest just practicing the first few squares that I did, and then just building your way up as you gain understanding to these more complex techniques. So, again, we want it to go from dark to light this way. And we're going to bunch up the hatch lines where it's darker and then expand them where it gets lighter. But also, we're going to increase the thickness of the hatch lines where it is darker. And then as it gets lighter, we're going to decrease the thickness, make it thinner. Okay? Again, so if you're working with an implement like a pencil, even a Koki pen can work, you're going to be pressing harder where it's darker and pressing lighter as it gets lighter. Okay, so there's a couple of ways in which you can improve your hatching. Now, how does it work on a three-dimensional object? Okay, so that's another very important thing that we need to address, because hatch lines are not only straight, they can be topographical. Now, if you've never heard that term, that has got to do with the lay of the land. So if you ever go over a hill, it goes up and down, it's not flat. So all of these lines expressing flat surfaces. Okay, so let's say you have a surface, I'm going to draw two of them, that's curved. Okay, so let's say that's like a sheet of a piece of paper, or you've cut a segment out of a pipe. There's my two curved surfaces. Now you can see they both curve that way. All right. So we can, like I have been, express light and dark on these curved surfaces in the same way, those first few ways that I showed you with just the parallel lines. It works. So, for example, let's do it on this. So let's say light is coming from the top. Okay, so I'm going to draw my hatch lines really close together at the bottom, and as they get closer to the top, they're going to expand. Okay, so then we have an illusion of it getting lighter and darker. All right. If you're going to express hatch lines topographically, now this is one of the benefits of hatch lines, is that you can convey an object's form with the direction of your lines. So what I mean is I'm going to follow the curve of the surface. And what this does, so I'm going to press lightly at the top, press hard at the bottom, using this technique here. What this does is this expresses the shape, it communicates the shape of the object in a very effective way. So I'm also going to go back and I'm going to strengthen the lines where it's darker. So hatch lines are very useful in conveying the sculptural nature of an object in a very quick way. So for sketching, it's brilliant. For drawing, it's brilliant. And neither way is incorrect. It really is up to you. I would say this method here is more advanced to this. It's a step up, okay? But I mean, I always go sometimes I'll express an object just with parallel hatch lines. It really depends on how I'm feeling, but it's really good to have all of these techniques in your toolbox. Now, before I end the video, I want to show you one last thing. If you've been watching this channel, you will see that we've used a spherical object quite a lot, so we can't end the video without demonstrating how hatch lines can depict a round object. Again, you can use, so the light's coming from this side, you can just use parallel lines, right? Getting really short and thick where it's dark, and then just thinning out where it gets lighter. Just remember that it has a shadow. Closer to the bottom of the object, it is darker. Or we can express it topographically. Following the curves of an object. Strengthening the lines where it is darker. To express its roundness. I want to do just one last one at the bottom here. Just a little one. With the lines closer together where it's darker. And just getting thinner and further apart where it's lighter. Right. So what I'd like you to do is go home and practice these techniques, get a page, divide them into little squares, and try each one as I did. Go back, watch a video, play, pause it, see what works for you, what needs to improve. The things that you're struggling with, go back, try again. Hatching is a really great technique. It's a step up from shading. It's really going to improve your drawing. It's going to improve your joy in drawing. Thank you so much for joining me today for this episode. Remember to subscribe, like, and share. I'll see you next time.